In this video, you learn basic concepts of React in very easy to understand language. So if you are a beginner in React or if you want to learn any specific topic from this, then this video is for you. This is the second section of my ultimate React.js course. So without wasting any time, let's start this video. So here I have new fresh React application. Now in this lesson, we will build our first React component. So to quick recap, the component is reusable piece of code that used to define certain part of user interface. So here in the source folder, we create a new folder called components. So in this folder, we store all components of our application except our root component, which is this app component. Now in this folder, we create a new file called card.jsx or JS. Now you might have question, what is the difference between JSX and JS extension? First of all, we can write any extension because they both work same. But generally, we use JSX extension because when our application grow, we may have to write some JavaScript code, and at that time, this JSX extension will tell you which file is React component and which file is just vanilla JavaScript code. Also, when we use .jsx, our code editor can give us better service like syntax suggestion, error checking, to write JSX code. But some developers also use .js extension, and if you are working on single project with multiple developers, then you have to use the same extension that they are already using. So here we use .jsx. These are the little details which many experienced developers doesn't know, and interviewer like to ask this kind of question. So you can note this point. And one more thing, always write component name with capital letter. Otherwise, it will not work in browser. I will tell you reason in the upcoming lesson. Now in this component, at the top, we have to import React from React package. After that, we have to define here function or class which will return JSX. So these are two types of React components, functional components and class components. Class components are little old for current time because for implementing class components, we have to learn some of the advanced concepts of JavaScript. And also, class component is little complex than functional component. When Facebook developed React first time, there are only one component type which is class component. But as React developed, it add functional components, and that makes React very simple and easy. So currently, almost all developers switch to functional component, and that's why I decided to create this course using functional components. So here we define function with the same name of our component, which is card. And inside this function, we will simply return h1 tag with text, let's say card component. Note that we can also create function by using arrow function syntax. And that's it. We create our first React component. You can see how simple it is to create React component. Just we have to import React from React library, and after that one function with component name and return the element which we want to display. Now let's verify this works or not. So as we know, we have to add this component in main.jsx file render method. So for that, we have to export this card function from this card component. Do you remember how we export function from the module? Right, by using export keyword. You are doing really great. So write export, and this card function is our main method. So we can export default and write here function name card. Save this, and now we have to import this card function in main.jsx file. So here, after this app import, we import card from, and in quotes, we have to pass our file path. So period / components/card. Now at the place of this app component, we simply pass card component. Save this file and take a look. See, here we get our h1 tag with text. So this is really simple to create components in React. If you are little confused, don't worry, with practice you will master React. When I first started learning React, I was also confused, but I kept learning and most important, practicing. Now here, I have one shortcut trick for creating the basic structure of components in just 1 second. Make sure you install the ES7 React Snippets extension. This is necessary for that. So we remove this complete code and just write here RAFCE, which stands for React Arrow Function Component with Export, and press tab. See, here we get the boilerplate for React components. By using these, we don't need to manually type this import, function, and export statements again and again. Press escape for single cursor and write here card component. Save the changes and take a look. See, it works the same. Now you might ask, why don't I show you this shortcut at the beginning? So the reason is, I want to explain you the complete structure of creating components. If I first show you this trick, then you cannot understand components properly. And I bet you understand creating component very well. Now let me give you a little exercise. You have to create another React component called create to do and return simple text create new to do from here in h1 tag. I am sure you can complete this exercise. Now before we start our next lesson, let me show you solution of previous exercise really quick. So in this components folder, we create a new file called create-to-do.jsx, and inside this component, we write RAFCE and press tab, and our component is ready. Now press escape, and at the place of this div, we return h1 tag and create new to do from here. Save these, and in main.jsx file, we import create to do, and we can also see suggestions here. Select the suggestion, and this will import our component from our folder. Now we simply pass here create to do. Save the changes, and see, here we get our create to do component. If you can't complete this exercise, then also don't worry, you can again watch the previous lesson. It is okay, there is no pressure at all. Now in the previous lesson, we create our component and we also return code looks the same as HTML code. But as I told you before, this is not HTML code, it is JSX, which is modern code for writing HTML and JavaScript together. We seen this in section 1, but that is just a little introduction. Now let's understand how it works internally. So as you may know, our browser can't understand JSX code, but it can understand vanilla JavaScript code. So we have to convert our JSX code in vanilla JavaScript code so our browser can understand it. So for that, we need a compiler called Babel. It will convert our JSX code into plain JavaScript code which browsers can understand and render. Let me show you that practically. So in our browser, open a new tab and head over to babeljs.io and go to this try it out section. So here we can write our modern JavaScript code and Babel will convert that code into JavaScript code which browsers can understand. So here we simply write const heading equals to h1 tag and pass here string, this is JSX. And see, here we get this code. So our JSX convert into this JSX function. Now first argument of this method is h1, which is our element type. And the second argument is the object, which have a property called children. Basically, children is what we pass inside our element. Now here we can also pass class attribute equals to main heading, and see, here we get class property in this object. So for developers, writing code using JSX is more simple and easy instead of writing this vanilla JavaScript code. So in short, we always use JSX for our components, and Babel will compile our code into this JSX function. And that's the reason we don't have to compulsory import React library at the top. But before React 18 update, we need to import React at the top. Now you might think, how can we see the old method of react.createElement? So here in this option, we have React runtime. By default, it is set to automatic, which is this JSX function, and we can change that to classic. And see, here we get this old method of transforming JSX code into JavaScript code using react.createElement method. If you want to read more on this topic, then you can read this article. I will attach official documentation link. So that's how JSX and Babel works in React application. Now in this lesson, we will add some elements in our component. So after this heading tag, we want to add one button. So we add button called add task. Now here we get error in our JSX expression. Let's hover this and see, we get JSX expression must have one parent element. Now you might think, why? So in the previous lesson, I show you JSX expression is converted in JSX runtime function. And also, we have seen react.createElement method. In this both method, here we can only specify one element. So if we write multiple elements in JSX, Babel will get confused which element should pick. So in JSX, we always add elements in one parent element. So we add here div and move our code between this div. Save the changes and see, Prettier format our code in structured manner. So that's why developers love Prettier so much. And Prettier also add this parenthesis and semicolon here. That's because of JavaScript auto semicolon insertion. For example, if we have only return and nothing else in that line, then JavaScript automatically put semicolon here. Let me show you. So we move our JSX into next line, and now if we save this file, see, JavaScript add here semicolon, and because of that, these next lines will never get executed. So that's why Prettier add here parentheses. Save the changes and take a look. See, here we get heading and button. Let's inspect it so we can also see the markup. So here in the root div, we get our div, and inside this div, we have our elements. Now sometimes we don't want to add this unwanted div for every React components. So let's see another method for adding multiple elements. So in React, we have one method called fragment. This fragment is used to add parent element in our JSX, but it will not return any UI component on browser. Let me show you what I means. So at the place of this div, we write react.fragment. Now if you wonder how I changed this opening and closing tags together, it's because I am using this auto rename tag extension. You can also install this extension for increase your typing speed. And here are the current installed extension which I used, so you can also check them. This material icon theme is for icons theme. I like that a lot. Now back to our topic, add React fragment as parent element. Save the changes and take a look. See, in the inspect, we have here only our two elements without that unwanted div. Now also, there is one more shortcut and easy method to add React fragments. So we can simply remove this react.fragment and that's it. These empty tags are also works the same as React fragments. Save the changes and see, it works the same. So in the previous lesson, we had multiple HTML elements in our JSX. Now let's see how to add a JavaScript expression or code into JSX. So instead of showing this text, we want to show total number of tasks like this. Now this 0 is hard-coded, but we want to show the actual number of tasks dynamically. So just for demo, before our return statement, we create one variable called task equals to, let's say 5. Now how can we show this task variable at the place of this hard-coded number? And the answer is very simple. So remove this number and add here curly brackets, and between these curly brackets, we can add any valid JavaScript expression. So we add here task variable, save the changes, and see, here we get 5. Let's change this task to 0, and also we can add text at the beginning or after these curly brackets. Save these, and see, here we get task 0. So between these curly brackets, we can write any JavaScript expression. This expression should return a value which will display at that position. For example, if we write here only true and save this, here we get nothing. So if we do not want to display anything, then why we write here that expression in JSX? So that's why I am telling you to add expression which returns a value, or we can even call function which can return a value. So after this task, we create one function called countTask, arrow function, and inside this, we return this task variable. And at the place of this task, we call countTask function. Save the changes and take a look. See, here we get 0 again. Now let's make this code little interesting as an exercise. So in this function, when this task variable is set to 0, we want to show a message no task available, else we display current task number. This is really pretty simple. I hope you can do that. Hint is, we can remove this task text and return complete string from this function. So spend some time on this exercise, and after that you can watch the solution. So first of all, in this function, we add condition if task equals to 0, then we return no task available, and else we return string using template string. If you don't know that, in template string we can access variable with string. Just see these, we add backticks, task, colon, and to access variable, we add $, curly brackets, and task. Now let's remove this task from JSX, we don't need that. Save the changes and take a look. See, here we get no task available, and if we change our task to 2, and see, we get here task 2. You can see how simple it is. I know you completed this exercise, or at least you tried to solve that. So take credit for that. Now let me show you shortcut trick for writing this same code. So I comment out this code, and at the place of using if-else ternary operators which we have seen in previous section. So write return, and first we add condition task equals to 0. Now add question mark for true and return here no task available. After that, colon for false and return here backticks task colon $, curly brackets task. Save these and see, it works the same as before. We can test it by changing its value to 0. And see, we get no task available. Now let's see how we can add attributes in these elements. It is really simple. We can do that same as we do in HTML. For example, we want to add here value property for this button. So we simply add here value equals to add task button. Now let's make this button disabled dynamically. So in our function, we define a new variable called hide button equals to true. Now when this hide button variable is set to true, we disable our add task button. So here we write disable equals to, now to access variable, we add curly brackets and pass here hide button. Save these and see our button is disabled. And if we set our variable to false, then our button is enabled. So that's how we use simple and dynamic attributes inside elements. Now let me ask you one question. How can we pass class attribute for elements? You might say class equals to and we pass class name here. But that will give us warning. So let's save these and open console. See, here we get this warning, invalid DOM property, class, and it also gives us suggestion, did you mean class name? So in JSX, we have to use class name attribute instead of using simple class. But why? So as I told you before, this JSX expression convert in simple JavaScript object, and in that object, if we use class attribute, and in JavaScript, class keyword already reserved. So that's why in React, we use class name at the place of class attribute. Now another important and different attribute is styles, which used to specify an inline style for an element. So in plain HTML, we write something like this, style equals to, and in double quotes, we write our styles, let's say color to red. Save these and see, we get here error which says we have to use here values, not a string. So in JSX, we have to set this style attribute to plain JavaScript object which contains styles. So at the top, we create one object called styles equals to object. Now we have to pass all CSS properties in camel case notation, which means except first letter, every first letter of new word is capital. For example, if we want to add background color, then we write background and new word which is color with capital C and pass value to red. I know this is little confusing, but don't worry, 99% time we don't even use these inline styles. Now let's pass this styles object in this style attribute. So for that, we add here curly brackets because we are adding JavaScript and add here styles object. Save the changes and take a look. See, here we get this red background. Now some developers don't define this object separately. They add it directly in these curly brackets. Let me show you. So we cut this object from here and paste it at this styles object. So these first two curly brackets are for accessing JavaScript, and for style, we have to pass object, which is another curly brackets. And that's make these inline styles very confusing and hard to manage. And that's why we usually don't use inline styles in JSX. So let's remove these inline styles and also remove this styles variable. Now let's talk about how we can define or handle events in React. So handling events in React is very similar to handling events in HTML. Let's first of all clean our component. So we remove this constant, except this task, and also remove this function and remove this h1 element, and between these we pass task, curly brackets, task, and also remove this disable property. Perfect. Now as I told you, all React elements has events based on HTML events. For example, here we want to add click event on this add task button. So here we have on click and we also have on double click. So add here on click event equals to, and in curly brackets. Now can you tell me why we are adding here curly brackets? Right, it's because we have to add here JavaScript expression. In this case, we will add function which runs on this button click. Now in React, we have popular naming convention for handling events. So we create all events methods name start with handle. So by just looking the function or method name, we can say this is for handling this event. So here we create function called handle click. If we are handling double click, then this name will be handle double click. And also notice that most of the time we use camel case notation. So handle click, arrow function, and inside this function, we simply console.log add task. Now we have to pass this function reference in this onClick event. So right here, handle click. Save the changes and take a look. Click on this button and see we are getting add task message. Now make sure we don't call this function, because if we call that function here, then it will only run when these components get rendered on the browser. Now in this function, we want to increment the number of tasks. So for that, first of all, we have to make this constant to let, because we want to reassign its value. And in our function, here we simply write task plus plus. Save the changes and take a look. Click on add task button and you can see task counts are not updating on page, but we are getting this add task message. It means function is working fine. So let's check this task value is increasing or not. So after this message, we add comma and add task variable. Save these and refresh this page. Click on the button and you can see values are increasing, but it will not reflect on the web page. And that's the topic of next lesson. So in the previous lesson, we saw our task value is increasing, but it's not updating on DOM. So when we want to display something change on our DOM, then we can't define that variable or object or array as the normal JavaScript variable. So for displaying the change on DOM, we have state in React. This state allows us to manage and display the changing data in our application. So when we define our variable as normal JavaScript variable, then React will not reflect that changes if we change that variable value. But if we define our variable as state, then React will reflect that changes if we change that variable value. So in simple words, state is used to tell React what's this variable, and if it change, then reflect that change on the DOM. So as we know, React has virtual DOM. So when we change the state of one component, React gets this new component and compare this new component with the old component, and then only reflect those changes on the real DOM. Simple as that. So state is very important concept of React, and many beginner developers struggle with this concept. But don't worry, your all doubts will clear when you see this practically. So now you might ask, how can we define a variable as a state? So to define variable as a state in functional component, we have to use one hook. But before using hook, let's understand what is hook. So what are hooks? Hooks are the functions to use some React features in functional components. In other words, we can say that hooks are functions that make functional components work like class components. I know this sounds little complicated, but it's not. Let's understand with the story. Before React launched hooks, there is only one way to use state and lifecycle methods by using the class components. Now developers had some problems with class components, such as class are a bit difficult, especially for those who just started to React. Confusing with this keyword, and we have to write all boilerplate again and again when we create a new component. So React takes some time to develop special functions that we can use in functional component, and that special functions are called as hooks. So I think now you understand what is React hooks, which are functions that make functional components work like class components. And nowadays, hooks are very important concept of React which every React developers needs to learn. Now in the next lesson, we will see the first hook, which is used to define variable as a state. Now let's define this task as the state variable. So for defining state, we have one hook called useState. And this is one of the most important and most used hook in React. So to use any hook, first we need to import that hook from the React library. And also, all hooks name start with the prefix use. So all those functions that start with use are React hooks. So at the top, after this React, we add comma, and in curly brackets, we import useState. Now in our functional component, we call this useState hook, and inside this, we have to pass default value of the variable, which is 0, because we want to set task as 0. Now this function will return an array. So let's store that in variable called count array. And after that, let's simply console.log this count array to just see what is inside this array. Save the changes and take a look. See, this array has two elements. The first element is our original value, which is 0. And the second element is one function. Let me show you. So first of all, we store first element, count array, index 0, in variable called count. And now let's display this state variable on web page. So here, I am not removing this normal variable because I want to show you the difference. So we duplicate this line by pressing Shift plus Alt plus down arrow in Windows and Shift plus Option plus down arrow in Mac. These are little tricks which will increase your overall speed. Now at the place of this task variable, here we add count. Save these and see, this both looks the same. Now let's see how we can update this count state value. So for updating the state value, we have function as second element in this useState. So back to VS Code, and we store this count array second element in variable called setCount. This is the common naming convention for useState. So value of the state we called as normal variable name, and function which can set the value of that variable, we add set prefix for that function name. For example, count, set count, loading, set loading, etc. Now whatever value we pass in this set count function, it will be the value of this count variable. Let me show you what I means. So here, we want to increase this count by 1 when we click on this add task button. So we write set count, and inside this, we want current value, which is count, and plus 1. So when we click on this button, first it will get the current value of count and then add 1 in it. And this setCount function will set this value, which is 0 plus 1, as this count. Simple as that. Save the changes and take a look. Click on this button and see, count state is increasing by 1, but task variable are still same. And also, tasks are always state to 1. Why? Because when any state change in our component, whole components gets re-rendered, or we can say run again. And that's why task is always stay at 1. Don't worry, we will understand that re-rendering in detail in upcoming section. And another thing, if we refresh the page, this count again start with 0, because here we set default value as 0. If we pass here 5, then on refresh, we get here 5. So now let's remove this task variable and also remove this h1 tag. Now here, our code looks little bit ugly because we can see for creating one state variable, we have to write 3 lines of code. Imagine if we have 3 to 4 state variables, then how messy our code looks. So let's make this code shorter using array destructuring. Let me show you. So I comment out these 3 lines and we write here useState, and inside this we pass default value to 0. Now let's store this in variable, and at the place of variable name we add square brackets, and inside that first write the first variable name, which is count, and then write function name, which is setCount. So this single line works the same as these 3 lines, and that will make our code clean and easy to maintain. Let's recap this useState hook. So useState is used to create state variables in functional component. So to use the useState hook, we need to first import that and use it inside the functional component. Here we can pass any type of data like boolean, number, text, object, array, anything, and then store it using array destructuring. The first variable is its current value, and the second variable is the function for updating that value. Simple as that. I know some people gets a little confused here. I was also confused when I learned useState hook for the first time. But with practice, I learned this concept and use that in my projects. Now many times in our application, we have to take user's input. For example, user fill login form or user write something in search bar, then we need to get that input value in our component. So let's create one input with type text. Now when we write something in this input box, we want to display that value. So for that, we add here onChange event, which runs every time when something changes in that input box. Same as we do in vanilla JavaScript. So in this onChange event, we add function called handleChange. Now let's define this function. So const handleChange equals to, here we use arrow function. Now in this, we want to console.log current inputted value. So for that, we have to pass here event object, and this event object contains various information about that input field. So write clg for console.log and add here event.target.value. This expression will return the current value of that input box. Save the changes and take a look. Write something and see, here we get these values. So it's working. Now we want to show this current text on our web page. So can you guess what we will use here? Let me give you a little hint. This current value is changing and we need to display that changes. Can we use normal variables? No. Then what we will use? Right. We use useState. Now before using useState, let's remove these 3 lines of code. We don't want that. And also we remove this task and console.log from handleClick function. Now here is the one more thing. We always define our useState hook at the top in our function component, so we can use that state in whole function. So we call here useState, and inside this we pass our default value, and for input we want to set it to empty string. Now let's store this in variable and we use here array restructuring, input and set input. Now in this handle change function, at the place of this console.log, we write set input function. Simple as that. Now at the end, let's display the current input. So add another h1 tag and input to curly brackets input. Save the changes and take a look. Write something here and see immediately we are getting the current value. So that's how we get value of inputs in React. Now here I have a little bonus for you, and that's the shortcut way to write this useState line. So just write useState. If you are not getting this, then install that ES7 extension which I told you to install in the beginning of this course. So select that and see, here we get template for useState. Now here we get multiple cursor which will change this both name. So write input and press tab. This will automatically write set input in camel case. And pass here default value, empty string, and press escape. And our new state variable is ready. This is the beauty of this extension. So I hope you like this trick. Now in the next lesson, we will see how to display list in React. Now let's see how we can display the list of arrays in React. For example, here we create one array called task. And for now, we just add here task 1, task 2, and task 3. Now here we have to display each task on our web page like this. We add one unordered list, and inside this we add 3 list items. We have to do that using the map method. So here we have to add curly brackets because we are going to add here JavaScript expression. So task.map, and inside this we get each task arrow function, and now we simply return here JSX, which is list item. Let me explain you what is happening here. So when we use map method in this single task, first we get this task 1. So we have to display this task string here between this JSX element. So again, we use curly brackets for accessing JavaScript expression inside JSX, and we pass here this task. Simple as that. Now let's add here our unordered list, and inside this we will move our list items. Save the changes and take a look. See, here we get this list with all items. If you have doubts about map method, then you can again watch map method lesson in JavaScript refresher. Now here is a one little issue. In our console, we get this error. Each child in a list should have a unique key prop. So the reason we are getting this error is because we need to uniquely identify each item of this list. Because if something changes in any of this list item in virtual DOM, then React needs to quickly identify which item changed, and according to that, React needs to update the real DOM. So back to VS Code, and always remember, when we use map method in React, we need to pass unique key for returning element. So we write here key, and here we have to pass a unique dynamic value, which is this task string. So we simply pass this task. Now here, we are using this task string, but in real world application, we have each task object with the unique ID. And at the time, we pass task.id. Don't worry about that, we will also see that in the upcoming sections. And also, note that this key should only need to be unique in this current list. It doesn't mean you can't display this list again in this application, okay? Save the changes and refresh the page, and see, the error is gone. So that's how we map list in React. So congratulations, you successfully run the basic concepts of React. Now using these concepts, we are going to build our first project. I am very excited about this and hope you are too. So that's it for this video. I added the summary PDF of these topics in the description. Feel free to download it. Comment what you want to learn next, and I will see your smiling faces in the next video.